Good morning. So we are so thrilled that we are going to be speaking today with Azim Khamisa. I met Azim several years ago. We've had him on the show a couple times for his other books, which are wonderful and really inspiring. And today we're going to have him on again. We decided to do it as a Zoom interview as well as an audio, so we're really excited. And Azim has presented for the mediation conference in which I was in charge of about 4 or 5 years ago, and he did a fabulous job. Everyone walked out of there so inspired. So I hope that you get a lot out of today because Azim is really a wonderful mentor for us all. So and I just want to tell you, I've been reading his book, and this is a wonderful book called The Secrets of the Bulletproof Spirit, How to Bounce Back from Life's Hardest Hits. And this book will help you no matter what you're going through, if it's a divorce, a death, any kind of tragedy, for you to really get that bulletproof spirit, which we're going to talk about right now. Azim went through a very difficult time in his life, and he's going to tell us about it in just a minute. But when his son was murdered in 1995, and of course he went through the dark night of the soul, but from that he emerged to start the Khamisa Foundation, which then really spread the idea of love and forgiveness, and it's really helped millions of people. So we're going to talk about that now. So Azim, let's get started. And why don't you tell a little bit about the background, because you say it with such grace. I'd love my audience to hear it.
Well, thank you, Mari, and thanks for having me back on your show. Well, the Bulletproof Spirit really came to play in my consciousness after I lost my son, Tariq, which, as you know, was a very tragic incident. It happened 24 years ago. He was a great kid. He was a student at San Diego State University.
Yes.
And worked as a pizza delivery man on Fridays and Saturdays. Was lured to a bogus address by a youth gang. There was 4 of them. 3 of them were 14. The leader was 18 years old, who gave a 9mm handgun to a 14-year-old, and in a gang initiation gave him the order to shoot and kill my son, which he did. And my son died at the young age of 20. So needless to say, it brought my life to a crashing halt. He was my only son. I have a beautiful daughter. It's very complex for a parent to lose a child. And I went through all the emotions you'd anticipate a parent to go through. Suicidal at one point, really did not know how to move forward. I had him for a short 20 years. He was an important part of my family, as all children are.
Yes.
But I've survived it, and what really helped me get through it was my spiritual foundation. Practice as a Sufi Muslim. My mom was very spiritual. My dad was a businessman. So I grew up with equal emphasis on my career and my spiritual life. And I started to meditate when I was 20 years old. And I lost my son in my early 40s. And I used to meditate an hour a day. Today, my practice is 2 hours a day. And in my deepest crisis, which, as you pointed out, was the loss of my son, couldn't eat, all the biological functions change. But I could meditate, and I can connect with him that way, and I can still do that. And I was educated in England. I was born in Kenya. My roots are Eastern, and my education background is in mathematics and finance. And in my deepest crisis, I said, all those degrees were useless.
Right.
What really helped me was my spiritual foundation. Even Einstein said, we must take care not to make intellect our God. Sure, it has powerful muscles, but no personality. It cannot lead, it can only serve. This is Einstein. So in life, you're going to get problems your intellect is not going to be able to solve, even though you might have a double PhD. In life, you're going to get problems your hearts are not going to be able to heal. Then where are you? But by the same token, there are no problems, and I want to underscore that there are no problems that you're going to get into your life that your spirit cannot solve or heal. And I think I'm a good example of it, because A spirit is bulletproof. You can't kill a spirit. You can't burn it. You can't wet it. You can't see it, but we all possess it. And the way I connect with my spirit is through my meditation. And for your viewers and your listeners, there are 2 free guided meditations on my website. One is on forgiveness, because I talk a lot about forgiveness and teach forgiveness. And the other one is on manifesting your goal. I now believe for sure that the spirit is much mightier than the intellect or the loving heart. And now I bring spirit into everything. I don't lead from my intellect or my loving heart. I really lead from my spirit. Because spirit, if you believe in spirit or a higher power, always helps you make the decisions that are in the highest good for you, the other person, and the universe.
Right.
I think that connection with the spirit is important to develop. And this book is about that.
Right, right. So you say that all of us have the bulletproof spirit. And so how do we tap into that when a crisis occurs? I know you've meditated. I've been meditating since I'm 19 years old, but I do 20 minutes every morning, and I probably should be doing 2 hours like you do. But at least it gets me going, and I will meditate during the day when I need it. But for those people who don't meditate, what are some suggestions? I know you have a bunch of suggestions in your book, but what are some suggestions for people when they have this horrible thing or tragedy that happens to them in their lives?
Well, there are many. There are 30, we call them secrets, but there are 30 chapters, and each chapter is written with the idea of providing the lesson, and also then there is a boot camp. So some of the lessons that I teach in that first of all, you have to go through a grieving process. We have lost grieving as medicine. There's a great adage from the Turkish culture: he who conceals his grief does not find a remedy for it. And there's a right way to grieve and a wrong way to grieve. The right way to grieve is to be able to essentially feel the pain. Rumi says the cure for pain is in the pain. We in the Sufi faith that I grew up, we have 40 days of grieving. When you're not supposed to cook or clean house, I was getting food and people from my mosque for 40 days and taught that this is the time for you to grieve. And it was very painful because I would say, Tariq, I couldn't say died. It would take me a while. And since he died in such a tragic way, they wanted the whole story. And I used to think, I can't tell this story one more time. But
sure.
it was very healing to be able to share that. I know it's like taking the scab off the wound.
Right.
The scab reformed, it was a little smaller. So the right way to grieve is to read something inspiring, is to meditate, is to pray, is to share, is to be able to not suppress those feelings, but to share them with people that care. The Sufis, we chant a lot, we pray a lot, and every hour after I told the story, we went into a grieving process of chanting and prayer and meditation. So the important thing is journaling was something that helped me a lot. And I still journal, even 24 years later, because it gets you to be able to deal with it. Another great quote that I like from Rumi, which says, the light enters through the wound.
Yes.
So it's important to grieve, but it's also important to stop grieving. So otherwise you stay a victim.
Right.
So in my culture, after the 40 days, I was told by my spiritual advisor that the reason we have a 40-day ritual is because the spirit of my son stayed in close proximity of my family and his good friends. But after 40 days, the spirit moves to a new consciousness because we believe there's a journey after death. And I was given the guidance that excessive grieving by family and friends after the 40 days will impede my son's journey in the next world.
Go on to the next level. Yeah.
So rather than grieving after 40 days, do a good, compassionate deed in the name of the departed, which essentially creates spiritual currency for the departed and provides high octane fuel for his journey in the next world.
gives him all that love and all that caring for him
Yeah,
to.
and I thought, why did they teach this in college? That's what kind of inspired me to start the Khamisa Foundation, because his name is on the marquee.
Yes.
And we do good deeds in his name every single day, so that I could create millions of dollars of spiritual currency so he could finish his journey in a rocket.
Yeah.
That felt good because it's a win for him, it's
Yes.
a win for me, and it's a win for all the kids that we've helped. So essentially, now it took me more than 40 days, to be honest with you. It took me
Oh, yeah.
2.5 years. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's important to grieve correctly. Incorrectly is to go on to
hide it, to bury it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't, or take pills, and doctors are very quick to give you all of this antidepressant stuff, and I never took any pills. Or you go to alcohol, or you go to illegal drugs. That's the wrong way to grieve.
Right.
The right way is, as Rumi says, the cure for pain is in the pain. And I truly believe God does not give you any more pain than you can handle.
Right, right. And there's a saying that when your heart is broken, it breaks open so that the light of God can come in. I always love
Actually,
that.
it's one of my quotes that says that there's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart.
Yeah.
But a broken heart is an open heart.
Right.
If one can learn to live with an open heart, then gentle transformations begin to manifest.
Right.
I work really hard to keep my heart open, because you can't grieve with a closed heart. It's only with an open heart that you don't judge, that you can provide and receive love more freely, because you have an open heart.
Yeah.
And the shortest cut to your spirit is through the heart.
Right. So after you grieve, what you did was you got into forgiveness. And I would love for you to tell the story of how you reached out to your son's murderer. I think that's so inspiring and really touches all of us.
Yes. Well, here's, as you pointed out, every saint has had the dark night of the soul. But sometimes in deep trauma, there is a spark of clarity. When I got the news about Tariq's death, I remember I was in my kitchen. I lost strength in both of my legs.
I bet it felt like
Collapsed to the
bomb
floor.
hit you. Yeah.
Yeah, I collapsed to the floor, hit my head against the refrigerator. And the pain was so excruciating that I actually had my first out-of-body experience. And I couldn't be in my body because I couldn't deal with the pain. And I believe in the higher power. I believe in God. And I left my body. And I believe I went into a loving embrace of God. And it was like a nuclear bomb that had gone off in my heart, if you can imagine that.
Sure.
And I don't remember how long I was gone. But when the explosion subsided, God sent me back into my body with the wisdom that there are victims at both ends of the gun.
Yes.
Now, that didn't come from my intellect or my loving heart. I don't think us mortals are capable of that.
No.
But that it was a download from a higher power. So who is the enemy here? Is it the 14-year-old who killed my son? Or is it the peer pressure and the societal forces that force many young men, especially young men of color, to fall through the crack and choose lives of gangs and crimes and drugs and alcohol and weapons? That's the real culprit.
And
So
they're looking for connection. They're looking.
Exactly. They're looking to belong, as you pointed out. So that was an hour and a half after my son died. I gave the killer the same status as my son. That's for them both to be victims. But then 9 months later, I started the foundation with the mission of stopping kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence. And essentially started with 3 mandates. First was to save lives of kids. How many do we lose every day? Think about 2018, 341 mass killings. How many school shootings every single day?
Too many.
Yeah, so the first goal was to save lives of kids. I mean, it breaks my heart. In Newtown, Connecticut, first graders, 5, 6 years old, 20 of them.
Sandy Hook, yeah. Yeah.
They had a lot of living to do. Our second mandate is to empower the right choices so they don't fall through the crack. And our third mandate is to teach the principles of empathy, of accountability, of compassion, of forgiveness, and more importantly, peacemaking and peace building.
Yeah.
And I start with a very simple premise, Mari, that violence is a learned behavior. If you accept that as a truism, then non-violence can also be a learned behavior. But you have to teach it.
Right, right.
Where are our kids going to learn about non-violence? So then I approached the grandfather and guardian of my son's killer soon after I started the foundation with the attitude, I'm not here screaming retribution or revenge because your grandson killed my son. Rather, what I really see here is we both lost a son.
Yeah.
My son died and you lost your grandson. It was like a son to him because you lived with him and calls him daddy.
He raised him, yeah.
Yeah, to the adult criminal justice system. I can't bring my son back from the dead, and you can't get Tony out of prison. The one thing you and I can do is to make sure no other parent or grandparent has to suffer what you've done or what you have been through or what I have been through. Will you help me? So fast forward the 24 years, we've created a safe school model. We have 4 programs. The first one is a life program. The grandfather and I are like brothers. We've been together for 24 years. This man's grandson killed this man's son, and we got together. So it's quite a story, and I'm really, really hopeful and pleased. I've given now over 1,000 school presentations to 1 million kids, over 150,000 letters. It gives a lot of hope that these principles that we are teaching of nonviolence are not only teachable, our kids are hungry for them.
Yes.
And besides even teaching these principles, right, we're cutting expulsions and suspensions by 70%. Because when you expel a kid or suspend a kid, guess where he ends up?
They're on the street, right?
Absolutely. They're 5 times more likely to get involved with crime and gangs if they're expelled than if they're in school. So we don't believe in expulsion and suspensions. I wish I could tell you we can stop 100% of expulsions and suspensions. We're not there yet, but we're at 70%. And it's affordable. Our safe school model is very reasonable. It costs $10,615 to provide free public education in California. It costs $148,000 to incarcerate a youth for 1 year.
Yeah.
And even after spending that, the recidivism rate is 84%.
Yes.
So 84% go back in. Our safe school model costs $100 a kid a year.
Yeah.
So it's a good investment.
It makes financial sense, but more than that, it just changes people's lives, which is so much more important. Let's talk a little bit about when you actually met Tony and that whole forgiveness and what it's done to Tony, because I know that was
that's another amazing story. I met him when he was 19. He's 38 years now. So he's 19. Yeah, I've known him for 19 years. And I met him when he was in Folsom Prison. And he knew I'd forgiven him because I'd been with his grandfather for a good 4.5 years. And that was a very cathartic moment because when I told the grandfather, I want you to go with me. This is the first time I'm going to see Tony.
Yeah.
Well, I did a long time with him because he was the last person to see my son. And that's also in the story that only he can complete. So he was very gracious, the grandfather. He left us for an hour and a half. And I talked man to man with Tony. And sure enough, he was able to fill in some of those holes. But at one point, I'm sitting really close to him across a coffee table. We locked eyes. I'm looking in his eyes. He's holding that glance. And I'm looking in his eyes trying to find a murderer. And I did. I was able to climb through his eyes and touch his humanity, that I got the spark in him was no different than the spark in you or me or anybody else who was listening to this conversation. I wasn't expecting that. He was respectful. He was remorseful. He was well-mannered. He was a likable kid. I could tell my hand of forgiveness had changed him. So at that point, I told him, Mari, that I've forgiven you because your grandfather and I have been working together for a good 4 years. But I want you to know when you come out of prison, there's a job waiting for you at the Khamisa Foundation. You come and join your grandfather and me. And when I left, I remember clearly, even though it was 19 years ago, the bounce in my stride was a lot more bouncier than when I walked in. And I thought like a big albatross was lifted
Yes.
shoulder. And I thought to myself, forgiveness can be so freeing. I knew at that point that I'd completed my journey of forgiveness. And I thought to myself, why did I wait 5 years? Now, fast forward, he wrote, and I have a trilogy, Murder to Forgiveness, Forgiveness to Fulfillment, Fulfillment to Peace. It's a 20-plus journey that started dark with murder, but that ended up in peace. I'm at peace today that I never have been before. Not that I don't want Tariq back, of course. I want him back in a New York second. But
And you know you'll see him again. You know
that. Forgiveness was, my portal to peace was through forgiveness.
Yes.
And Tony wrote the foreword to that last book. He recently got parole. I was there in November.
Oh.
He's still involved with the judicial system because he has to go through a halfway house and all of that.
Right.
But he'll be out sooner or later, totally. But he definitely won parole, so he's on his way out. And we look forward to the day. I mean, he's been in prison for 24 years, but he's turned out to be a fine young man. He already does a blog on TKF website. And I know when he's eventually able to be on stage with me and says, when I was 11, I joined a gang. When I was 14, I killed Mr. Khamisa's son.
How powerful that will be.
Yeah, I wish I could turn the clock back.
Yes.
So he'll save a lot of kids that are probably thinking about joining a gang at the age of 11, 12, 13, because he understands that he wishes, and I sincerely believe he would love to turn the clock back. Obviously, you can't do that. So I think he's going to be a powerful emissary when he becomes part of the foundation.
Yes, yes. So let's talk a little bit about forgiveness, because I deal with people, you know, that are angry and have a conflict, and then I'm sitting there trying to help them to resolve conflict, whether it's divorce or whether it's a partnership agreement. There's a lot of unforgiveness. And I tell people how important forgiveness is. And let's talk about why it's so important for the person who forgives.
Right, because I think when I wrote my first book, From Murder to Forgiveness, you almost had to go back to the scriptures. That was 21 years ago. There wasn't much on forgiveness. Today, there are 500 clinical studies that show forgiveness is healthy. I do a 2-day workshop in Hawaii every April, which is a deep dive in forgiveness. I teach both, how to forgive people that have harmed you, and how to forgive yourself, because at some level, we've all harmed, and we need to look at our own stuff before we can get to peace. But the main thing that I could share with you in a few minutes is it's important to separate yourself from the offender, whoever that is. I had my journey, Tony had his journey. I'm going to leave Tony to the higher power.
Right.
Because if you stay in anger and resentment, who are you hurting?
So
there's a great quote from Mandela: resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemy to die.
right.
So
Right.
I would say you leave the offender to the higher power. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. Here's a good example of it. I gave a 2-day workshop in St. Paul, Minnesota, a few years ago, and I remember this lady, a Jewish lady, that it's a 2-day workshop. It's a train-the-trainer workshop.
Right.
On the morning of the second day, she says, Azim, you don't get it. And I said, what is it I don't get? I'm trying to forgive Hitler. And you could see the anger because her family, unfortunately, was a Holocaust, victim.
Right.
A big blemish in our history. And I think about it, it still tears me up. I said to her, how is it working for you? I mean, I could see the etch of face, anger on her face.
Right.
I said, listen to me. The higher power knows how to deal with Hitler better than you do or I do. And as you and I'm speaking, the higher power is dealing with Hitler. Why do you want Hitler to live in this meager, important real estate of your psyche?
Yeah.
Why don't you let it go so love and joy can live there, knowing that Hitler's being dealt with, so you don't have to be in that space. And she got it. The light bulb went on, and even by the end of the second day, you could see a different aura.
Yes.
He sent me a beautiful card a month later. I get a lot of cards, but this was a beautiful card thanking me for the workshop, but on the PS was, my husband thanks you. We've been married for 35 years. We now have the most loving relationship because Hitler does not live here.
Right.
So the point is, you get forgiveness because it's better for you, knowing there's no escaping wrongdoing. leave the offender to the other place. If you can get that,
Yeah.
then you can start the process of forgiving by grieving,
Yes.
giving up all the resentment, and like I did, maybe reaching out to the offender with love and compassion. Not everybody has to reach out to the murderer of his child. I mean, often, as you pointed out, it's divorce and it's business partners. I do this work in the business world. There's conflict and management teams.
Sure.
A lot of angst in our lives. Even in father-son, I've seen that, mother-daughter, siblings fighting over inheritance. When you finally decide that forgiveness is healthy for you, knowing that even Christ said, take the plank out of your eye so you can see the speck in your brother's eye more clearly. Leave the offender to the higher power. Karma always balances.
Right.
So,
well, what a perfect way to end. That's perfect. Well, Azim, we're so glad to be with you again and to share all of your wisdom and all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your forgiveness. I know when I talk to people, I say, you have to forgive for yourself. Otherwise, you're like shackled to the past.
that's right.
That's one thing you're not. And so we will definitely have you back again. We honor you. Let's give your website so that my audience can know to go and find you.
Yes. So my website there's two websites. One is a foundation, which is TKF, T as in Tom, K as in King, F as in Frank.org. And then my personal website is my name, azimkhamisa.com.
You also have for your book, bulletproofspirit.com.
Yes, yes.
So that's another one where you have a lot of great resources there.
Yes, there's plenty on YouTube as well, and plenty of interviews and podcasts. So if you just Google my name, a lot of it will show up. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you.